Okay, well, I'll start with an announcement from the upstream Ceph leadership call earlier today. The decision was made to fork the reef release branch. That should be happening today. So anything that still needs to get to reef will have to merge to main and go through backports. Soumya, I believe that's you with the topic on sync policy.
Hi, Casey. Yes. So I have a request. So I've tested most of the cases with the bucket sync disable using sync policy. So a request review. Also, Yehuda, I updated in the PR that I see an issue with the latest master that out of 3 zones, if only 2 zones are configured to get synced, still third zone is pulling the data. This looks like a regression, at least in the downstream, which is equivalent to PNC release. We don't see this issue.
Yeah, I'll add that there seems to be a related issue with BI log trimming on archive zones specifically, where sync policy is telling it to query the other zones even though they're not syncing from it. So that's preventing logs from being trimmed. And I think the archive zone shouldn't be recording any logs anyway. So it seems like there's a disconnect to how sync modules interact with the sync policy.
Well, why shouldn't archive zone in any case not record? Like you can, in theory, can have something that's pulled from an archive zone.
Maybe that would make sense, but the sync module interface has a virtual function saying whether the module should export data, and archive zone says false there. So I don't think it's intended to.
Probably not. Not by default, at least. Yeah, I wonder what we need to do there to make it correct, like and not to disable use cases that might be useful.
So in terms of review, Yehuda, would you be willing to look at this?
I can try. Can you put me in the PR?
You are already there, Yehuda. In fact, you added some comments also.
Okay.
So you asked to test few more cases. I had tested them. That's when I encountered another issue with 3 zones. I filed a upstream tracker for that.
Okay. I'll try to take a look.
Thanks. And one more thing I observed is, where suppose out of 3 zones, some zones are not part of the sync. If we configure policy such a way, do we still need to? I mean, the sync status still shows those zones which are out of sync as a source. I mean, it looks incorrect. Do you think we should correct the sync status? At least bucket sync status is showing appropriately, like it shows only the source zones of those zones which are part of the sync, but sync status shows all the it includes all the zones in the zone group, even though they are not syncing from those zones. I pasted the tracker issue I raised for it, upstream tracker in the Etherpad. I just want to check if it's feasible to correct that. I mean, I haven't looked into how sync status works in this sync policy case.
The Redis to admin sync status command shows zones that
Suppose zone 3 is suppose not part of the sync policy. I mean, it's sync, only zone 1 and zone 2 are allowed to sync among each other. Still, if I run sync status command, it shows zone 3 as the source for both zone 1 and zone 2.
Now here's is it disabled or is it allowed but not enabled? It can be used. It can be a hard problem to solve. What I'm saying, but like there can be the obvious case where it's disabled in the policy. Then yeah.
I mean, I haven't explicitly disabled it, but I have set a policy at zone group level, including only zone 1 and zone 2. So by default, zone 3 should be disabled, right?
Well, I don't remember the specifics. It could be that the flow is permitted but not enabled. In which case it can be at the bucket level.
So if I paste it in the same tracker, if I run bucket sync status command, it clearly shows that bucket sync is disabled for zone 3. So that output is correct, but only sync status
for the
command.
specific bucket though.
Yeah, yes.
Right, that's a problem. It can be that you can enable it to do it to sync between with to have the sync for zone 3 or from zone 3 for a specific bucket because it's allowed. So
yeah, I mean it does look tricky to even fix it because there could be multiple policies allowing symmetrical or directional in whichever many directions.
Yeah. So if it shows zone 3, I don't know if it need to make sure that if it's disabled at the zone level, then we don't show it, or or I think, or mention something about it disabled. Or
yeah, at least that it's not syncing from this zone.
Yeah, but if it's allowed at the zone level, then I don't think we can. We should even because it's allowed, and then we might have something at the bucket level syncing.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Heather. So I'll check with explicitly setting policy to disable and see how the status works.
Cool.
Thanks. That's all I have on this. Thanks, Casey.
Thanks, Omya. Thanks, Yehuda. I added RGW HTTP client as a topic, just kind of following up on the email that I sent to the list yesterday. So I'm planning to try to use the new class that I made for testing of the HTTP3 front end. But I think it could also be useful in multi-site. Kind of the problem that I'm thinking of right now is how to use it on both sides, because for the HTTP3 front end, it has to link against boring SSL, and so can't be exposed to RGW directly, and then kind of vice versa on the multi-site side.
Other
So
reason
I'm
to
kind
make
of thinking that it could be just a header-only implementation included by both.
Casey, are there reasons to use this new client inside the RGW beside HTTP and Quick, just for the existing HTTP client that we're using?
Potentially, especially around multi-site, there's a lot of kind of complicated and messy layering over the existing HTTP manager. And I think that we could clean up a lot of that by using curl directly with this. But also for the prototyping that we want to do with C++ 20 coroutines, RGW HTTP manager doesn't support those. We were talking about using Beast earlier in earlier discussions, but I think this this new curl library could work really well there, and it has the templated ASIO interface to work with any kind of coroutine or async.
Right, but isn't this a more kind of obvious choice there, as it is already built with the CP20 coroutine support? I mean, curl
Sorry,
is really a
did you
C
say
library.
Beast?
Yeah, the Beast client is already built with the C++ 20 coroutine support, and curl is a C library, and it needs some kind of wrapping to be able to work with the C++ 20 coroutines, right?
Yeah, but Beast is missing a lot of features that we discussed earlier in that thread. Stuff like connection pooling and all of the timeouts and retries.
And all of HTTP too.
Okay, that's a good reason.
Yeah, I'm finding that I like libcurl more and more as the years go on. The only downside really is that it's C only, and so you can't do stuff like custom allocators. Essentially, you have to allocate each curl handle and then allocate each individual header.
Yeah, but I guess for the for multi-site, any advanced HTTP features are actually very useful because like it's a server-to-server communication, right? So HTTP3 would even be good, or could be good there because of the features that it has, which are better for server-to-server communication.
Yeah, I definitely could see HTTP3 being useful for multi-site on the client side, but we would have to overcome the hurdle of OpenSSL versus boring SSL linkage. The strategy for the HTTP3 front end right now is to build it entirely as a shared library that links statically against boring SSL. And then RGW DL opens that and calls into it. That way it can hide all of the boring SSL stuff from RGW, which is already linked against OpenSSL. So if multi-site wanted to use a curl client that supported boring SSL, then it would essentially have to hide all of the curl stuff behind a shared library interface, which is doable, but the prototype that I have is kind of just relying on the application to do all of the libcurl stuff and then just process it asynchronously.
And what would prevent us from just linking the RGW against boring SSL? Is there a reason not to do that?
Yeah, it's a mess. That's what I tried to do initially. I'll share a link to the PR. It's in the agenda. So the boring SSL header is essentially compatible with OpenSSL's headers. So it was kind of tractable to get Ceph at least some components to build against boring SSL. But one of the main blockers was Ceph Manager, which has a ton of Python stuff. And for one reason or another, it requires the OpenSSL version to be exactly the same as the Python version that it's using.
Can't we do that only for the RGW, not link Ceph completely with boring SSL, just the RGW?
So the OpenSSL dependency is part of Ceph Messenger, which is part of Ceph Common, which includes, Ceph context and logging and all of the other stuff that RGW needs. So we would essentially have to kind of detach all of those things from Ceph Common, and I guess build a separate messenger stack specifically for RGW. So I don't know. It's worth discussing. Someday OpenSSL is going to support Quick, I hope, maybe. And once that happens, I think this would simplify life for everything here. But that may be years down the road. So I don't know. I don't think there are easy answers here. For now, I think loading the front end as a plugin is kind of the easiest thing in the short term.
Okay, thanks.
But other than that, I don't have much to discuss. Any other thoughts on HTTP stuff? Added a link to the PR that has the prototype HTTP front end, if anybody's interested in playing with it. Any other agenda topics? If not, I think we'll call it here. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, you.
Thanks. Bye.